Hi, I'm Fiona and welcome to Inner Vivid. If you are new here, we like to get people together to share stories and swap ideas about the art of spirituality. Is it possible that I could be a spiritual person? If so, can that impact my decisions, my choices, and how I live? Well, you can probably see that I think it can, but what about you? And what about other ideas? This is episode 1 of the 4th big theme, which is, wait for it, and we're checking out big ideas about choices that we make as individuals and groups. Just how do we get the stuff of living done? Do I have to choose between loving myself and considering others? Are there rules about this stuff? Who gets to decide those rules? And what happens when we all just want to say, nah, you can't make me? First up, we asked some people a question. Choose one, love yourself or love others.
Well, if you love yourself, you can't help but love others.
Oh, so you see that as a natural flow-on effect?
Yes, I do. It's a flow-on effect. Loving self means you can care and love for others.
I think the same as Pauline. You can't love others if you don't love yourself first. So I think, you need to love yourself, and through that leads to wanting to love others and help others.
Well, others, obviously. Why? I think it fulfills you more. I think you actually get more joy, as we've been speaking out in community. If you're only feeding off your own love, I guess it's temporal, it's up and down, it comes in waves.
Lovely.
Final answer, lock it in, Eddie.
Love others, because if you can, then I think you do love yourself. You shouldn't really say choose one or the other, because you can't have one without the other.
It's a false dichotomy. D-I-C... Oh, I shouldn't have started that.
Sure, it's a weird question. Can we love others without loving ourselves? But that dynamic underlies the big idea for this episode.
Human beings have to get along with each other. How do we decide how to do that? Are there some good ideas?
Well, human beings don't actually have to get on with each other, but it makes for a very lonely existence if you don't. You could choose to live in isolation, but I think that we are essentially communal and community creatures. We enjoy being in the company of others. We choose our friends, and we generally live in family groups, whether they're families that we've chosen or whether they're families that we've been born to. And those relationships enrich our lives very deeply. So for most people, it really is in our best interests to be able to get on with each other. And that often means compromise. And compromise can be difficult. Sometimes it can feel a little bit like you're letting go of a part of yourself, and that can be quite painful. Giving way to others can be difficult, especially if it's something we passionately want to hold on to ourselves. But for the bigger picture, for the greater good, we need to be able to find ways to muddle through and get along.
Well, living together, I think, is the key thing. Getting along with one another is really good for so many things. One, for security, one for social well-being, and one, because we need one another. A lot of friends whom I used to play basketball, soccer, and volleyball together back in Africa. And I still have that relationship with most of them to the present time. But I have to tell you one example of a good friend who came to Australia in 2002. And he got his own family. He came from an extended family. But because of the love that we share together, the life that we share together, and our stories, and the care we give to one another, that make that man send me the phone among other friends. And that's why I'm here, because the love that we had together bring me to where I am today. So that's the beauty of loving and caring for one another.
Okay, so maybe we don't have to work together or get along, but it sounds like the magic happens when we choose relationship. Choosing community can impact small things like which jam your family puts on its toast at breakfast. Prioritising relationship can also impact huge decisions like Mamors, deciding which country could be the place for a brand new life. So, humans have been doing this for thousands of years. We must be pretty good at all this getting along business, right?
Wow, ethics 101. I think as humans we haven't actually worked that out, which is why we have so many wars, why we actually need laws and rules, because when it's left up to the individual, we tend to become a bit wayward.
Great question. I don't think human beings are really good at getting on with each other. I think history's shown us at times we are really poor at it, and we're really useless at it, if you don't mind saying, at the moment, when we have wars springing out all around the world. We have a great tendency, I think, to other people, to make other people seem less than human in one way or another. I think we've done that throughout history. I think we find it easy, in a sense, to kill and hate people if we think somehow they're not quite as human as us. I think one of the things that we see in the great religions is this sense of loving the other. And the real question is, how do we actually love people we don't like?
Hey, that's a great question, John. How do we actually love people that we don't like?
I think Bill and Ted had a really good method of living that sort of thing, and that was to be excellent to each other. And to an extent also the 12th Doctor in Doctor Who said, always try to do good but never fail to be kind. And I think those are two good approaches to take to living together in harmony, just to be excellent. Don't be a word that I can't use on the camera, but actually be pleasant to each other, be kind to each other. Just try to appreciate that what the other person is thinking and feeling is just as valid and as important as what you're thinking and feeling, and try to understand each other before you make any rash judgments. I think that's kind of key.
It's such a complex question. I think there's so many facets that we could dive into. Two, I guess, fundamental ideas. The first one is respect. I think if we can respect everybody, we don't have to like everybody. I think there's always going to be people in your life who you might not gel with very well, but I think even if you can respect those people, I think that is probably the most important thing for me anyway. And if we can do that together as a community, as a society, as a world, imagine where we'd be. And then I think once we have respect down pat, as hard as that probably is, then if we can have empathy and compassion for people, especially for those who are less fortunate. And I think that hopefully for me it's a practical compassion as well, thinking about what can I do to help those people in my life or even in my wider community or my wider circle who maybe aren't doing so well. I think once we have those two things down pat, I think that's how we get along with each other, that's how we respect each other, and that's how we live a life where we can really be harmonious together.
Yeah, that can be tricky sometimes, can't it? I think step one is wanting to get on with people or making the decision to at least try. I think being comfortable with diversity, being comfortable with being able to agree to disagree, being comfortable with the fact that there are some people who you're going to find easy to like, some you're not, and that's okay. And I think the key to getting on with people is being able to sit in that state of just acceptance.
Oh, wow, Gemma, be comfortable with diversity. Thanks for that. I love the freedom that your idea gives us. Let others be who they are, and the flip side, this gives us permission to be who we are. Okay, now I can relax. And for those times when it's all too much and we just can't be our most excellent selves, Alyssa's respect and compassion are foundational. While we're at it, our Innovivid team came up with some other cool ideas for the how-to part of this question.
Absolutely, there are some good ideas, but it's trial and error, isn't it? I think we practice and have practiced always. So that's one of the great things about humans. We've got language to pass on stories, and stories tell us what worked and what didn't work, And that's how we keep working out, I think, what to do, how to be human community together. And all those great stories that are warnings about don't do this, don't go there, don't try that. History tells us that's a bad idea, but history or experience tells us that this is a really good idea. I think that's what we do.
So I like to look at what previous cultures have done and what my culture has done, both the creatives and the philosophers and the religious leaders. And I think one that is common is sometimes called the golden rule: do to others as you would have them do to you.
I mean, I think there's lots of good ideas about how we get on with each other, and I think religions across the world have lots to say about these. My understanding is that across world religions there is some equivalent of the golden rule, that we're to do to others what we would want them to do to us. And I think those ideas have come through thousands and thousands and thousands of years of people thinking about what does make for good life and for good living and for living with other people. These ideas have emerged out of religious groups and communities. So I think that there is a lot there that helps us think about how we might act. The other thing I would say is that I think these days researchers in like psychology and sociology are finding that a lot of the things that religions have said are actually true in their application. For instance, people are happier if they're involved in serving other people, that people are happier if they're not focused on their own happiness all the time. So it's interesting that when, you know, science starts looking at some of these things, they find the kinds of things that religion has been saying for a long time, because they've been tried and tested in those groups.
So as a human family, we've had to try and work out how to make it work, how to build civilization. For a long time we were part of very small groups, tribes and family groups, and they obviously had a way of working out a law and a way of living. Now that we've got into these large conurbations, which have tended to depersonalise us a bit, we've got a big project on our hands, I think, in terms of how we actually do work out how we live.
Sure, it's a big project, as Peter C. notes there. It seems like every new generation and culture has to figure out what worked. Gillian mentioned that humans have history, memory, and culture to draw on and learn from. But don't we have to weigh up the received wisdom with new discovery, new information? Is this process of getting on, of making human society, an ongoing adventure, an adventure in invention and reinvention? Can it be that most of us swim about in this sea of frustration and hope, where we try to balance our needs with those of others around us? What do you reckon, Peter Kay?
As human beings, I think what we need are systems of living together, political systems, cultural systems, that actually create space for things like conflict and antagonism. The sort of dream that human beings can live together without things like conflict and antagonism, that we could all create some sort of harmonious society in which we all get along perfectly, that is itself a kind of fantasy that paradoxically it actually produces the most insidious forms of violence, because you have to exclude from the group, from the society, whoever doesn't fit into our neat picture of harmony and togetherness. So I think we need ways of living together that actually invite and hold space for disagreement, for conflict, for antagonism. And I think when you have that, that can actually drain and deflate some of the kind of vitriol out of some of those things. I think we need systems that basically provide the basic human needs for everybody. And that we have societies that collectively decide as a society to provide those needs to everybody. Food, safety, housing, education, access to arts, access to leisure, then I think we need societies that simply recognize that all human beings need access to these things as a basic right. And then I think that actually creates a space where conflict and antagonism can be held, can be generative in a way that's not simply deadly.
That rings true for me. I've learned a lot from our Inner Vivid team in this first episode for Theme 4, How to Live. Essentially, that everyone is different, that life is better when we collaborate, that there's a lot to be said for regular reality checks to make sure that we have ways of dealing with the inevitable conflict and antagonism. There's so much wisdom in our collective history, and it's worth checking in with new ideas and discoveries to make sure that systems work for everyone, especially the most vulnerable. We can strive for minimum alienation, maximum compassion. What do you think? This paves the way for the next episode of Inner Vivid. What is right and wrong? Are they just things that we decide? And if so, then who gets to decide?